Why you'll never be rich. The neuroscience behind your financial struggle. Introduction. There's a moment that happens to most people around 30, 40, or 50 where they realize something is fundamentally wrong with their relationship to money. But they can't quite name what it is. They've done everything right. They work, they save, they read articles about investment strategies, and they understand intellectually that they should be further along than they are. And yet, when an opportunity to earn more appears, something inside them panics. When they have extra money, it disappears within weeks. When someone wealthier enters a room, they feel something close to shame. This isn't laziness or a lack of financial education. This is something much deeper, a program running in your nervous system that was installed long before you had any say in it. Your parents taught you what money meant by how they acted around it, not through lectures, but through their energy, their arguments, their silences. Your grandmother's fear of poverty became your caution. Your father's shame about his job became your doubt. You absorbed these lessons so early and so completely that they stopped feeling like lessons at all. They just became your reality. Here's what most people don't understand. Your conscious mind wants wealth, while your subconscious mind is actively protecting you from it. Your brain learned that money was dangerous or unreliable or something that destroyed relationships. It learned that safe people stay small. It learned that wanting too much makes you greedy or ungrateful. And for decades, your brain has been keeping those lessons alive, whether you want it to or not. The science of this is actually straightforward. Neuroscientists have documented how our beliefs literally rewire our neural pathways. Researchers studying behavioral economics have shown the precise ways that subconscious programming controls our financial decisions. Quantum physics offers insight into how consciousness itself shapes what reality we actually perceive and attract. The mechanisms are understood. The pathway is clear. What's been missing is someone explaining all of this in a way that actually lets you change it. This book walks through the actual reasons you struggle with money, not surface reasons like you don't budget properly, but the deep architectural reasons your brain fights against your own wealth. You'll understand where your money blocks came from, why they've been so difficult to shift despite your best intentions, and what actually needs to happen, not eventually, not when you have more time, but starting immediately, to rewire yourself toward financial stability and abundance. Chapter 1. The programs your parents never told you were running. Your parents taught you everything about money long before you understood what money actually was. Not through careful lessons or deliberate conversations, but through the energy in the room when bills arrived, the tension around the dinner table when promotions didn't materialize, the particular silence that fell whenever someone mentioned lack. Your young brain absorbed it all as survival information, not data to process, but instructions for how the world actually worked, encoded directly into your nervous system. That's how these programs install themselves. They bypass your rational mind entirely, settling into a place deeper and older than logic, the part of your brain that was designed to keep you safe. For decades, this program has been running in the background, making decisions for you, filtering opportunities through a lens you didn't choose, and probably don't even know exists. Think about the moment you came home as a child and heard your mother say, "We can't afford that." It wasn't an economic analysis. It was a verdict on your family's relationship with abundance, delivered with an emotion attached: fear, shame, resignation, hope that next month would be different. You didn't store that as information. You stored it as prophecy. And somewhere in your body, you believed her. You still do. even if consciously you've spent 20 years trying to prove it wrong. Here's what happens when you inherit this kind of programming. Your conscious mind, the part that reads personal development books and listens to motivational podcasts, wants one thing. It wants financial security or wealth, or at least the freedom to not worry constantly about money. Your conscious mind is ambitious and logical and capable. But your subconscious mind, the part that controls approximately 95% of your decisions without you even realizing it, is running a completely different program. And that program is designed to keep you exactly where you are. Because where you are is where you learn to survive. Most people don't understand why they sabotage themselves. They reach a level of success and something inside them panics. They get a promotion and suddenly they're interviewing poorly for the next role. They have extra money in the bank and somehow they spend it within weeks. They're about to take a business to the next level and some part of them creates chaos that derails the whole thing. They don't realize what's actually happening. Their subconscious is protecting them from the danger it believes money represents. It's not laziness. It's not stupidity. It's not a character flaw. It's a program working exactly as it was designed to work. 3 patterns emerge in people who've inherited these money programs. 3 ways the subconscious maintains control over your financial life without you even knowing it's doing it. The first pattern is what you might call the scarcity lock. Your parents lived as if money was scarce, even if they had enough. Maybe they didn't have enough. Maybe they genuinely struggled. Either way, you learned that the world doesn't quite have enough to go around, that there's never quite enough cushion, that you need to be careful. Now, even when you earn good money, even when your circumstances have changed dramatically from how you grew up, some part of your mind treats resources like they're running out. You save compulsively, or you can't enjoy what you have, or you make financial decisions from a place of panic rather than strategy. The scarcity lock doesn't care that you logically understand your circumstances have changed. It cares that your nervous system was trained to expect not enough, and it's doing its job protecting you from the disappointment of believing in abundance, only to have it taken away. The second pattern is self-sabotage at the threshold. This one shows up most noticeably right before breakthroughs. You're about to sign a contract and suddenly you find a reason to back out. You're interviewing for the job that would double your income, and you say something in the interview that sinks your chances. You're about to raise your rates, and you convince yourself now isn't the right time. There's a version of you, an older, wiser version from a part of your psychology you don't have access to, that understands something your conscious mind doesn't. That staying small, staying poor, has kept you safe. Not physically safe necessarily, but psychologically safe. Because if you're poor, no one expects too much from you. If you're struggling, you have an excuse for anything. If you're not successful, you can't fail at being successful. Your subconscious doesn't want you to fail at success, so it sabotages before you have the chance to fail. The third pattern is what I'll call the loyalty code. This is the belief that success somehow betrays your parents, or your family's story, or your own past. Maybe your parents struggled and you promised yourself you'd make it different. But at some deep level, there's a loyalty operating. Making money becomes like leaving them behind. Getting ahead becomes like saying their struggle was avoidable, like you're judging them for their choices. So you stay where they were, not because you're trapped, but because loyalty runs deeper than logic. You unconsciously keep yourself at their level as a way of saying you understand them. You're not too good for the life they lived. You haven't abandoned them. Each of these patterns is running in the background right now for many people. Not as a choice, not even as something you can see directly, but like a program that keeps reinstalling itself, adjusting your decisions so that your outer life matches the inner blueprint your nervous system built in childhood. And here's the part nobody wants to hear. No amount of hustle is going to override a program this deep. You can't willpower your way past your subconscious. You can't think your way out of a problem that lives below thought. The neuroscience of this is actually straightforward. Your brain has something called neuroplasticity, the ability to create new neural pathways through repetition, emotion, and attention. Researchers have documented how beliefs literally rewire the physical structure of your brain. And here's the critical part. Early experiences, especially emotionally charged ones, create the deepest pathways. A single moment at age 4, one phrase from your mother delivered with real fear in her voice, creates a stronger neural pathway than 100 rational arguments you make to yourself as an adult. But here's what matters. The same property that locked the program in place, repetition, emotion, attention, can unlock it. Your brain didn't choose to create that program, but your consciousness can choose to create a new one. Not by ignoring the old program or pretending it doesn't exist, but by understanding it, acknowledging its purpose, and systematically building an alternative. Before we can do that, before we can even think about change, you need to know which pattern has been running your financial life. Write down your answer to this. What is the phrase about money you heard most often growing up? It might be, "We can't afford that." It might be, "Money doesn't grow on trees." It might be, "Rich people are corrupt." It might be, "Our family isn't the type to be wealthy." It might be something someone said once that hit particularly hard. Write it down, and next to it, write how that phrase is still influencing decisions you make today about money, the jobs you apply for, the prices you charge, the money you spend, the opportunities you're drawn toward or repelled from. Don't overthink it. Just notice the connection. Because once you see the program, you can't unsee it. And the moment you can't unsee it, it starts to lose its power over you. The question that remains, the one we're about to explore, is whether you're willing to build a new program, an actual rewiring of how your nervous system relates to money. Not because your current program is your fault, but because your future is your responsibility. Chapter 2. How your brain became your prison. The neuroscience of money blocks. Your brain didn't design itself. It evolved over millions of years, layer by layer, each new development adding complexity but never erasing what came before. The oldest part of your brain, the part that controls survival, is still running ancient software. It's looking for threats. It's trying to keep you alive. And when it comes to money, it's operating on information from when you were 5 years old, treating that ancient data like gospel truth. The part of your brain responsible for fear and survival is called the amygdala. It's small, it's ancient, and it has one primary job: protect you from danger. When your mother said, "We can't afford that," your amygdala registered it not as financial information, but as threat. Your body released cortisol and adrenaline. Your nervous system encoded the message: money-related situations are dangerous. Fast forward to now, and the same thing happens. You see an opportunity to earn more, and your amygdala floods your system with the same chemicals it would release if you were facing a predator. Your rational mind knows it's an opportunity. Your nervous system thinks it's a threat. This is where most people get stuck. They understand logically that their fear doesn't make sense. They can articulate why their beliefs about money are outdated. They know intellectually that they deserve financial security. But understanding something and being able to override your nervous system's survival response are two completely different things. Logic lives in your prefrontal cortex, the most recently evolved part of your brain. Fear lives in your amygdala, which is older, faster, and evolutionarily more powerful. When the two are in conflict, the older system almost always wins. The brain also has something called the reticular activating system, or RAS. This is your brain's filter. Your senses receive approximately 11 million pieces of information every single second. Your conscious mind can process about 40. The RAS is the bouncer deciding which 40 make it through. It filters based on what your brain believes matters, what's consistent with your existing beliefs, what aligns with the programs you've already installed. If your program says, money is scarce, your RAS will highlight every news story about economic downturns and ignore the dozens of opportunities passing by you daily. If your program says, rich people are corrupt, your RAS will notice every example of wealthy people behaving badly and dismiss evidence to the contrary. This is why simply reading a self-help book or listening to a motivational podcast rarely creates lasting change. You might consciously absorb the information, but your RAS hasn't changed. Your filter is still the same. You'll leave inspired for a few hours or a few days, and then you'll return to your baseline beliefs because nothing actually shifted in the system that determines what you notice, what you pursue, and what you avoid. The neural pathways in your brain are like physical highways. The more you travel a particular route, the more worn the path becomes, and the more your brain will automatically default to that route when faced with a decision. If for 40 years you've been thinking, I'm not good with money, that neural pathway is deeply grooved. It's a superhighway running straight through your brain. Every time you encounter a financial decision, your brain defaults to that highway, without even asking if it's the right route. It's not choosing that thought. It's just following the well-worn path. But here's where the neuroscience gets genuinely hopeful. Neuroplasticity means your brain can create new pathways. This isn't spiritual thinking or wishful thinking. Neuroscientists have documented this physically. They can see, using brain imaging, how repeated behaviors and thoughts literally alter the structure of the brain. New neural pathways form. New highways get built. The old pathways don't disappear, but they fade with disuse. Your brain remains capable of change, no matter how old you are or how long you've believed something. The challenge is that creating new neural pathways requires 3 specific things that most people either don't do or do incorrectly. The first is repetition. You can't think a new thought once and expect it to override 40 years of an old thought. The second is emotion. Dry, logical repetition doesn't rewire the amygdala. But repetition combined with genuine emotion does. When you access a real feeling, genuine gratitude, authentic excitement, sincere relief, you activate the emotional centers of your brain, and that's when actual rewiring happens. The third is specificity. Vague aspirations like, I want to be richer, don't create new neural pathways. Specific concrete beliefs and visualizations do. I want to be richer is too abstract. I am someone who handles money with confidence, who makes strategic financial decisions, who earns and keeps what I earn, is specific enough to create actual pathways. Most money change programs fail because they address one of these 3 components, but not all 3. They give you repetition without emotion. Affirmations you're supposed to say while feeling nothing. Or they give you emotion without repetition. A one-time workshop that moves you deeply, but doesn't continue long enough to build new pathways. Or they give you general aspirations without specificity. The ones that actually work address all 3. Specific, emotionally engaged, consistent repetition. There's another piece of neuroscience that's critical to understand, something researchers call embodied cognition. Your body and your mind are not separate systems. They're interconnected. Your thoughts influence your body. Decades of research shows this. But your body also influences your thoughts. If you hold your body in a posture of confidence, your brain actually registers that and shifts your psychological state. If you move through the world as if you're someone who belongs, your brain begins to believe you actually are. This is why wealthy people often seem to move differently, speak differently, take up more space. They're not necessarily born that way. Rather, the repeated experience of having resources and freedom change their physical embodiment, which then reinforce their psychological state. Your nervous system is also what scientists call state-dependent. This means you encode information and form memories based on your psychological state when that information arrives. If you're in a state of scarcity and fear when you're trying to learn about investments or make financial decisions, you'll encode that information through a lens of fear and limitation. Later, when you try to recall or apply that information, you'll retrieve it in the same state. But if you can access a state of calm confidence, of genuine possibility, when you're learning or deciding, you'll encode it differently. You'll be able to access it more effectively later. This explains why so many people fail at implementing financial advice even when they intellectually understand it. They learned the advice in a neutral or fearful state. Their body was tense. Their amygdala was engaged. So the advice got encoded as something dangerous or anxiety-provoking, even though the content isn't inherently anxiety-provoking. When they try to implement it later, their body and brain resist because they remember the fear, not the logic. The last piece of brain science that matters here involves something called the default mode network. When your brain isn't focused on an external task, it engages the default mode network. And that's where your beliefs live. That's where your sense of identity is maintained. That's where your automatic thoughts come from. Most of the time, you're not consciously choosing your thoughts. You're running in default mode, and the default mode is streaming whatever beliefs you installed early. This is why you can read a book about abundance and feel genuinely inspired for a few hours. But then you go home and slip back into your default thoughts about scarcity. You didn't actually update the default mode. You just interrupted it temporarily. The implication is profound. You can't think your way out of money blocks. Thinking alone doesn't access the systems that actually need to change. You have to access the amygdala, the nervous system, the embodied self, the default mode network. You have to work not just with your conscious mind, but with the deeper systems that actually run your behavior. Chapter 3. The Invisible Architecture. Why willpower fails and what actually works. There's a particular kind of torture that happens when you understand intellectually what needs to change, but find yourself unable to change it. You know, you should feel confident about money. You know you should be able to ask for what you're worth. You know that abundance is available. You understand all of this with crystal clarity. And then you get to the moment where you're actually supposed to act on it. The moment to negotiate, to invest, to launch something. And something inside you revolts. You freeze. You make an excuse. You find a reason why now isn't the right time. And you're left feeling like a failure, because after all, you know better. This is the trap of believing that knowledge equals power. It doesn't. Knowledge is only power when it can actually influence your behavior. And your behavior isn't run by knowledge. It's run by a combination of beliefs, emotions, nervous system states, and habitual patterns. Your conscious mind is like a passenger on a bus. It's convinced it's driving. but it's really just sitting back commenting on where the bus is going, while the actual driver, your subconscious, is making all the real decisions. Willpower is one of the most oversold solutions to personal change. People genuinely believe that if they just try harder, if they're more disciplined, if they exercise more self-control, they can force themselves to change. They can white-knuckle their way to new financial behavior. What actually happens is this. Willpower is a finite resource. Your prefrontal cortex, where willpower lives, can only handle so much. It gets fatigued. And when it's tired, what emerges is whatever your subconscious has been running all along. It's like trying to hold down a beach ball underwater. You can do it for a while, but eventually you get tired. And the ball pops up to the surface, which is exactly where it wants to be anyway. The reason most people's financial situations don't change is not because they lack willpower. It's because their belief systems and their nervous systems are still organized around their original programming. They're trying to create new behavior from the same psychological foundation that created the old behavior. It's like trying to change the software running on a computer while leaving the operating system intact. It doesn't work. This is where most personal development approaches fail. They focus on changing behavior, create a budget, start investing, ask for more money. But they don't address the underlying architecture. They're treating the symptom while ignoring the system. A person can successfully create a budget for 3 months through sheer willpower. But if their underlying belief is, "I don't deserve financial abundance," the budget eventually gets abandoned. Money still mysteriously disappears. New opportunities for earning still feel threatening. Here's what actually has to happen. You have to go back to the foundational level. You have to identify the core beliefs that were installed early. You have to understand what function those beliefs served. Your brain didn't install a belief that you don't deserve money randomly. It installed it because that belief provided some kind of protection, some way of making sense of the world, some way of maintaining a connection to people you loved. Once you understand the function, the reason your nervous system installed and maintained that belief, you can do something about it. The quantum physicists talk about something called the observer effect. The observer determines the nature of what's observed. Your consciousness literally shapes what reality you perceive and what reality you attract. Most people dismiss this as spiritual or metaphysical thinking, but there's actually a psychological equivalent that's well documented. What you focus on, what you believe is possible, what you hold as true about yourself and the world. These genuinely shape what you're able to perceive, what opportunities you notice, what you're willing to pursue. If you believe that wealth is corrupting, you won't notice or pursue the opportunities to earn more. Your brain will filter them out. If you believe that money coming easily means something is wrong, you'll unconsciously sabotage success when it arrives. If you believe that your family isn't the type to be wealthy, you'll make decisions that keep you in alignment with that belief, even when other options are available. Your beliefs aren't just thoughts. They're active filters that determine which version of reality you experience. This is where the real work of money change has to begin. Not with budgets or investment strategies, though those matter eventually, but with examining and updating your relationship to the fundamental questions: who am I as a person around money? What is money? What does having money mean? What do I deserve? What is possible for me? There's another component to the invisible architecture: your nervous system's tolerance. Your nervous system has a certain capacity for change, for risk, for new experiences. If your tolerance is narrow, if you've lived your whole life in a controlled, limited way, then even when you consciously desire something different, your nervous system might not be able to tolerate it. You achieve a level of success and your body gets anxious. You're supposed to feel excited about the opportunity, but instead you feel dread. You're supposed to move forward, and instead you find yourself making decisions that pull you back to what feels familiar and safe. Expanding your tolerance requires gradual exposure, what's sometimes called titration in trauma work. You don't go from $0 to $1 million overnight. You go from 0 to slightly more than you're comfortable with. You let your nervous system regulate and adapt. Then you expand slightly more. This is why sudden windfalls so often don't stick. Someone without a tolerance for abundance gets a large amount of money, and their nervous system responds the only way it knows how: by creating circumstances that reduce the discomfort of having too much, which usually means spending it or losing it. There's also the dimension of loyalty that operates in the invisible architecture. At some deep level, many people unconsciously keep themselves at the financial level their parents inhabited because it feels like loyalty. Out-earning your parents can feel like betrayal. Moving into financial freedom while your parents struggled can feel cruel, like a judgment on their choices, like abandonment. Your loyalty to your family story keeps you in alignment with your family's financial level. Your conscious mind wants more, but your loyalty runs deeper than logic. The invisible architecture is real. It's sophisticated. It's operating all the time. And it's not something you can overcome with more information or more motivation. You have to address it directly. Chapter 4: Quantum Consciousness and the Money You Attract. There's a principle in quantum physics that seems almost too strange to be true, yet it's been verified repeatedly in laboratory settings. It's called the observer effect, and it states that the act of observation fundamentally affects reality. Before it's observed, a quantum particle exists in a state of superposition, all possible states simultaneously. The moment someone observes it, it collapses into a single, definite state. The observer shapes the observed reality. Most people hear this and dismiss it as too abstract to matter in real life. They're skeptical because it sounds more like spirituality than science. But there's a practical equivalent operating in your psychology that's equally profound. Your consciousness genuinely shapes the reality you perceive, and therefore the reality you experience. This isn't metaphysical speculation. It's documented psychology. Your reticular activating system, which we discussed earlier, is functioning exactly like a quantum observer. Before you observe an opportunity for money, a chance to earn, a possibility to invest, it exists in a superposition of possibilities, technically available but not part of your conscious world. Your RAS is the observer that collapses those possibilities into either noticed or not noticed. And what determines what your RAS observes? Your beliefs, your consciousness. If your belief is that money is hard to earn, your RAS will collapse possibilities into those opportunities are actually difficult, or those won't work for me, or I'm not qualified. You won't even consciously register that the opportunity was there. It will have existed in superposition and then simply not appeared in your conscious reality. Someone else, with a different belief system, might walk through the exact same space and see the exact same situation and perceive completely different opportunities. The difference isn't in the objective reality. The difference is in what consciousness observes and collapses into existence. This is where the philosophical concept of plenitude becomes relevant. Some physicists and philosophers argue that all possible universes, all possible versions of reality, exist simultaneously in what's sometimes called the multiverse. In one universe, you're wealthy. In another, you're struggling. In another, you're not born at all. According to some interpretations of quantum mechanics, consciousness doesn't create these universes, but it does determine which one you experience. Your focus, your beliefs, your expectations. These are like a tuning fork, and your consciousness attunes you to the version of reality that matches your frequency. Ancient wisdom traditions called this resonance. The New Thought movement called it vibration. Modern psychology calls it priming or cognitive biases. They're all describing the same fundamental mechanism. What you believe to be true about yourself and the world acts as a tuning mechanism, aligning you with realities that match that belief and filtering out realities that don't. This is not mysticism. This is psychology meeting physics. When you genuinely believe you're someone who creates wealth, you think differently. You notice differently. You move through the world differently. You take actions that align with that belief. You say no to situations that would reinforce the old belief about poverty. You say yes to situations that align with your new belief. Over time, these micro-decisions compound, and the reality of your life actually shifts. The challenge is that belief is not voluntary. You can't just decide to believe something different about yourself or money. Your beliefs are built from years of evidence, or what your mind has interpreted as evidence. Your mind has built a model of reality. I'm not good with money. And this model has been reinforced 1,000 times. Every financial mistake got filed under proof. Every fear-based decision got filed under proof. Your mind has a massive folder of evidence supporting your current belief. To shift to a different belief, you need to introduce different evidence, not logical arguments, because logic doesn't dislodge beliefs that were formed emotionally and sensorially. You need different experiences. You need to practice behaving as if the new belief were true, and to notice what happens when you do. You need to create small successes that challenge the old model and provide evidence for the new one. This is where transurfing, the concept popularized by Russian physicist Vadim Zeland, becomes practically relevant. Zeland describes reality as a space of variations, an infinite sea of possible realities that already exist. Every possible version of your life is already happening somewhere in this space. The wealthy you, the confident you, the you that handles money skillfully. That version of you already exists, living their life in their version of reality. You don't need to create this version. It already exists. What you need to do is align yourself with it through a process of tuning in. Zeland describes this as releasing intention and sliding into the reality you want. It sounds mystical, but what he's describing is essentially a psychological state shift. You stop desperately trying to force yourself into wealth. You stop fighting against your poverty mindset. Instead, you identify the reality where wealth already exists in your future. You mentally slide into that reality, and you allow your present actions and decisions to be guided by that attunement. The practical implication is this: abundance or scarcity isn't just something that happens in your bank account. It starts in your consciousness. It starts with what you believe is possible, what you allow yourself to notice, what frequency you're tuned to. If you genuinely, deeply believed that earning more money was as natural and inevitable as breathing. If you truly expected financial security, the way you expect the sun to rise, your behavior would align with that certainty. You would make different decisions. You would notice different opportunities. You would ask for different things. And gradually, your reality would shift to match your internal attunement. The reason most people don't experience this shift is that they're ambivalent. They consciously want wealth, but they unconsciously doubt it's possible for them. They're tuned to two frequencies simultaneously. One part of them is calling in abundance. Another part is calling in scarcity. The signal is mixed and confused. Until your internal state becomes truly aligned, until you're not divided between wanting abundance and believing you'll be punished for having it, the reality you experience won't shift dramatically. There's a specific practice that bridges the gap between understanding this concept intellectually and actually experiencing it. It's about creating what Zealand calls pendulums, stable beliefs or energy patterns that align with the reality you want to inhabit. In practical terms, this means deliberately identifying and cultivating thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that are consistent with being someone who has money, who handles it responsibly, who deserves it. Not as a fantasy or pretend, but as a deliberate alignment with the reality where that version of you already exists. Chapter 5. The Money Personality, Your Specific Pattern and Why Generic Advice Fails. If you've ever followed someone else's financial advice exactly as prescribed and still failed to implement it in your life, you've discovered an important truth. Generic advice fails because it doesn't account for your specific psychology. Different people have fundamentally different relationships to money, and these differences are rooted in their personality, their history, and the specific pattern their nervous system created. There are essentially 4 primary money personalities, and most people are some combination of 2 or 3. Understanding which pattern is yours is critical, because it determines what strategies will actually work for you and which ones will trigger resistance. The first pattern is what I'll call the scarcity protector. This is the person who grew up with genuine lack or whose parents deeply feared lack. The scarcity protector's nervous system is wired to protect against deprivation. They tend to save compulsively, struggle to spend even on necessities, and experience deep anxiety when their savings drop below a certain threshold. The scarcity protector often earns decent money, but never accumulates it because they're too afraid to invest or deploy capital in ways that might grow it. They're protecting against loss more than they're pursuing gain. For the scarcity protector, generic advice to invest and let it grow actually triggers more anxiety because it feels risky. What works for a scarcity protector is building their confidence in what they have through small, safe moves that prove their security is real, not dependent on absolute control. The second pattern is the loyalty keeper. This is the person whose family struggled financially, and they carry an unconscious loyalty to that struggle. They might earn more than their parents, but they don't feel comfortable enjoying it or spending it freely. At some level, out-earning their family feels like judgment or abandonment. The loyalty keeper often sabotages success right before breakthroughs because emotional guilt pulls them back. They might earn raises, but then get injured or quit or find a reason to step back. For the loyalty keeper, the issue isn't information about money. The issue is resolving the emotional relationship to family and permission. They need to understand that honoring their family's sacrifice doesn't require matching their family's financial struggle. What works is grieving what their family went through while simultaneously releasing themselves from the obligation to repeat it. The third pattern is the avoidant denier. This is the person who grew up with stress around money and learned to avoid it as a coping mechanism. They don't look at bills. They don't check their bank account. They don't read financial statements. Confronting money creates too much anxiety, so they don't. The avoidant denier often ends up in chaotic financial situations, not because they're bad with money, but because they refuse to look at it. For the avoidant denier, generic advice to create budgets and track spending is actually counterproductive. It increases the very anxiety they're trying to avoid. So they'll abandon the system. What works is building tiny, manageable moments of financial attention that don't trigger the avoidance response, gradually expanding their window of tolerance. The fourth pattern is the imposter earner. This is the person who has actually achieved financial success, but doesn't feel like they deserve it or understand how they got it. They think they've fooled everyone, that eventually they'll be found out, that the money will disappear. The imposter earner often earns well but doesn't keep it because they sabotage at the threshold. They stay in jobs that underpay them. They make bad financial decisions right after earning well. They give money away unconsciously. For the imposter earner, the issue isn't how to make money. They've proven they can do that. The issue is believing they deserve to keep it and actually belong in the financial situation they've created. What works is identifying and removing the specific belief that's creating the imposter feeling. Not through logic, but through experience and evidence. Understanding your pattern isn't about labeling yourself. It's about getting specific about your particular resistance, your particular fear, your particular block. Because once you're specific, you can address it directly instead of trying to force yourself to follow advice that doesn't actually align with your particular nervous system. Most financial advice fails because it's written for the generic healthy person who has a relatively straightforward relationship to money. But most people don't. Most people have money blocks rooted in specific histories and specific patterns. The same advice that helps one person might actually reinforce the blocks in another person. Someone with a scarcity protector pattern needs to practice spending and trust. Someone with a loyalty keeper pattern needs to practice receiving and grieving. Someone with an avoidant denier pattern needs to practice tiny moments of awareness. Someone with an imposter earner pattern needs to practice belonging. When you understand your specific pattern, you can stop trying to implement generic advice and instead focus on what will actually move you. You can work with your psychology instead of against it. You can identify the specific thoughts, the specific feelings, the specific actions that need to shift for your pattern to change. Here's the crucial realization. Your money pattern isn't a character flaw. It's not a sign that you're broken or damaged or incapable. Your nervous system created this pattern for a reason. It was trying to protect you, trying to keep you safe, trying to make sense of your circumstances. Recognizing that allows you to work with your pattern with compassion instead of shame. And compassion is the environment where actual change becomes possible. The question isn't whether you can change your money pattern. The question is whether you're willing to understand it first, to work with it directly, and to make the specific shifts it requires. Generic change attempts will keep failing because they're not addressing your specific pattern. But targeted work on your specific block, your specific fear, your specific nervous system response, that actually works. Chapter 6. The Energy of Money. Frequency, Vibration, and the Law of Attraction. Money is energy. This isn't metaphorical. Money is literally a form of stored energy, work compressed into currency, potential squeezed into paper and digital numbers. And energy responds to frequency. Everything vibrates. Everything has a frequency. And frequencies that match attract each other. Your nervous system is constantly broadcasting a frequency based on your emotional state, your beliefs, and your physical embodiment. When you're in a state of fear about money, your body tightens. Your cortisol rises. Your breathing becomes shallow. Your nervous system is in a sympathetic state. Fight, flight, or freeze. You're broadcasting the frequency of threat. Money, metaphorically, moves away from threat. Opportunities dry up. People don't want to get close to you. The world matches your frequency with scarcity. When you're in a state of genuine confidence, of trust, of belonging, your body opens. Your parasympathetic nervous system activates. Rest and digest. The state where real abundance can be received and created. Your breathing deepens, your cortisol drops. Your nervous system is broadcasting the frequency of safety and possibility. Money, metaphorically, moves towards safety. Opportunities appear. People feel drawn to you. Abundance can find you because you're broadcasting the right frequency to receive it. This sounds mystical until you understand the neurobiology underneath. Your nervous system state literally changes what you pay attention to, what you pursue, what you avoid, what you attract through your energy and your actions. Someone in a scarcity state makes different choices than someone in an abundant state. They literally perceive different realities. Over time, these different choices create different outcomes. The person in scarcity frequency stays in scarcity. The person in abundance frequency attracts more abundance, not because of magic, because of consistent choices made from different nervous system states. The researchers who studied this concept in the context of quantum physics and consciousness call it observer-dependent reality. In simpler terms, what you expect to find, you tend to find. What you believe is possible, you tend to pursue. What you broadcast energetically, you tend to attract. This isn't the universe magically conspiring for you. It's you, through your consistent choices and your consistent energy, creating the reality you inhabit. There are 3 primary frequencies in relation to money that people unconsciously broadcast. The first is the scarcity frequency. This is the baseline hum of "there's not enough." It includes the nervous system tension of protection, the constant scanning for danger, the fear that any moment it could be taken away. The person broadcasting scarcity frequency might earn decent money, but they're broadcasting the frequency of not enough, so even with enough money, they feel poverty. They make decisions from fear. They hold tight. They don't invest or deploy resources because it feels unsafe. The universe, metaphorically, reads this frequency and provides more opportunities for scarcity. Problems requiring money to solve, sudden expenses, salaries that never quite stretch. Not because the universe is punishing them, but because their consistent choices and behaviors, rooted in scarcity frequency, create scarcity outcomes. The second frequency is the desperation frequency. This is active searching, grasping, need. It's the nervous system in overdrive, trying to force outcomes, manufacturing urgency, projecting an energy of, "I need this so badly." The person broadcasting desperation frequency might chase every opportunity, work excessive hours, say yes to things they shouldn't. They're broadcasting neediness, and people unconsciously pull away from neediness. Clients don't hire them. Investors don't fund them. They might work harder than anyone, but they get fewer results because people intuitively avoid those broadcasting desperation. The universe reads this frequency and provides more situations that require desperation. Always struggling, always scrambling, never quite enough time or resources. The third frequency is the abundance frequency. This is a calm knowing that there's enough, that more is available, that you're resourceful and capable. It includes openness, curiosity, appreciation for what already exists. The person broadcasting abundance frequency makes calm decisions. They're willing to take strategic risks because they trust in their ability to recover if needed. They invest because they believe in growth. They're generous because they don't feel threatened by others having resources. They're not desperate to be liked or hired because they genuinely feel their worth. People are drawn to them. Opportunities come to them, not because they're lucky, but because they're broadcasting the frequency that invites collaboration, partnership, investment. The universe reads this frequency and provides more situations where abundance shows up. Unexpected opportunities, favorable deals, resourceful people appearing in their lives. The question isn't whether this is real. The question is whether you're willing to examine your baseline frequency honestly. When you think about money, what do you feel in your body? Tension or ease? Dread or excitement? Defensiveness or openness? That feeling is your baseline frequency. That's what you're broadcasting consistently. And that frequency is shaping what realities you experience, what opportunities you attract, what outcomes you create. Shifting frequency isn't about forcing positive thoughts while feeling terror underneath. That's cognitive dissonance. It's not powerful. What's powerful is actually shifting your nervous system state through small, genuine experiences of safety and possibility. You can't force yourself to broadcast abundance frequency if your nervous system is actually in survival mode. But you can gradually, through repetition and small successes, expand your window of safety. You can create micro-experiences of abundance that prove to your nervous system that it's safe to broadcast a different frequency. This happens through action more than through thought. When you make a small financial decision from calm confidence instead of fear, your nervous system learns something. When you invest $5 that grows to $10, your nervous system learns that growth is possible. When you ask for what you're worth and actually receive it, your nervous system learns that you matter. These small experiences, repeated consistently, gradually shift your baseline frequency. The people who successfully shift their financial lives don't do it by staying exactly the same and thinking different thoughts. They do it by taking different actions that give their nervous system different evidence, which gradually shifts their frequency, which then attracts different opportunities that create different outcomes. It's a spiral. But it starts with one action taken from a slightly different frequency than your baseline. Chapter 7. The bridge between belief and reality. How your money story becomes your money life. Your money story is not just a narrative. It's a blueprint. It's the template that your unconscious mind uses to organize your financial reality. Every decision you make about money, every opportunity you pursue or ignore, every dollar you earn and every dollar you spend, these are all consistent with your story. Your story is so powerful that it can override logic, willpower, and even desperate desire to change. The money story includes several key elements. There's the story about your family's financial history, whether your family was rich, poor, unstable, secure. There's the story about what your parents' relationship to money was. Conflicted, generous, anxious, shameful. There's the story you've written about your own competence with money. I'm naturally good with numbers, or I'm terrible with finances. There's the story about what money means. Money is security. Money is power. Money corrupts. Money is freedom. Money is burden. There's the story about what it means to have money, to be smart or lucky or corrupt or worthy or selfish or isolated. These stories are woven so deeply into your consciousness that they feel like truth. They feel like reality. You don't see them as stories you created. You see them as facts about how the world works. And from the perspective of your unconscious mind, they are facts because they've been consistent. Your story has been repeatedly confirmed in your experience because your behavior, filtered through the lens of your story, creates outcomes consistent with your story. Here's how the loop works. You have a story. Let's say, I'm not good with money. Every time you make a financial mistake, it goes into your story as evidence. Every time someone else makes money and you don't, it confirms your story. Every time you read about some financial principle you don't understand, it proves your story. Meanwhile, evidence that contradicts your story times when you did make a good financial decision, times when you did succeed financially. These don't get stored as evidence because they don't fit the story. Your brain filters them out as anomalies or luck. Your story remains intact and self-reinforcing. Your financial decisions are made from within the framework of your story. If your story is, "I'm not good with money," then when you face a financial decision, you make it as someone who isn't good with money would make it. You avoid decisions you don't understand. You don't ask for help because you should already know. You don't take strategic risks because people who are good with money take risks, and you're not good with money. You make smaller financial decisions, limited financial moves. Over time, these decisions create outcomes that match your story. And the loop continues. The person next to you with a different story, "I'm learning about money," or "I'm resourceful," makes different decisions from the same circumstances. They ask questions, take managed risks, invest in learning. Over time, their decisions create different outcomes. The financial divergence between you and them isn't because of capability. It's because of story. To change your money story, you can't just rewrite the narrative. Your brain won't accept a false story. You have to create new evidence, to take actions that contradict your old story and create a basis for a new story. If your old story is, "I'm bad with money," you can't just start thinking, "I'm good with money." But you can take one small financial action from a place of careful learning. You can make one good decision, ask one good question, create one small financial win. One experience doesn't override a lifetime of story, but it's a crack in the foundation. Repeated over time, these cracks expand. You make another good financial decision. You have another small win. You notice something about yourself that contradicts the old story. Now you have two pieces of evidence for a new story. Your brain is starting to notice a pattern. Maybe I'm not as bad with money as I thought. Maybe I just needed to pay attention. This new story is fragile at first, but with consistent evidence, action after action that proves the new story, the neural pathways begin to shift. Your new story becomes stronger. It becomes your new baseline. This is why generic transformation programs fail for so many people. They try to change the story through information and inspiration alone. They tell you, "You're good with money. You deserve abundance. You can do this." But your nervous system knows you're lying. Your old story is still louder. The transformation only sticks when you create actual evidence through action. The most powerful part of changing your money story is this. You don't have to believe the new story right away. You just have to be willing to gather evidence for it. You act as if it might be true. You make one decision as if you were someone good with money. You ask one question as if you were resourceful. And then you notice what happens. You notice what you learn, what changes. You're not forcing belief. You're letting evidence build belief. The bridge between belief and reality is action. It's the decisions you make today that will become the evidence that determines your beliefs tomorrow, which then determine your decisions the day after that, which create the reality you experience next week and next month and next year. Your money life, the actual circumstances of your finances, the opportunities that come to you, the choices you're able to make, is not separate from your money story. They're woven together so intricately that they're the same thing. Change the story through evidence, and the life changes. Chapter 8. From Understanding to Action. The specific practices that rewire your money code. Understanding why you have money blocks is important. It creates compassion for yourself. It removes shame. But understanding alone changes nothing. Your nervous system doesn't care about your intellectual insights. It cares about evidence. It cares about repeated experience. It cares about what your body learns through action. Understanding is the map. Action is the journey. The practices that actually work are simple, which is why most people skip them. They're looking for something complex enough to justify the struggle. But the practices that create real change are almost deceptively straightforward because they work with your nervous system rather than against it. The first practice is identification and honesty. Write down your specific money story, not the generic version, but your actual story. What did your parents believe about money? How did that belief shape your childhood? What conclusions did you draw? What do you believe about your capability with money? What emotions come up when you think about earning more, about spending, about saving, about asking for what you're worth? Don't edit these answers. Don't make them sound good. Just write what's actually true for you. This isn't about judgment. It's about clarity. You can't change what you won't acknowledge. The second practice is small, experiential actions. This is where the real rewiring happens. If your story is, "I'm bad with money," you don't overcome that by thinking positive thoughts. You overcome it by taking one small action, researching a financial topic you've been avoiding, making one informed financial decision, asking one question to someone you trust. Notice what happens. What do you learn? How does it feel? Now you have one piece of evidence that contradicts your story. Repeat this. Small action after small action. Your nervous system gradually gathers new evidence. Your story begins to shift. The third practice is nervous system regulation through embodied action. Your money blocks live in your nervous system, not your mind. So you have to access them through your body. This doesn't require meditation or anything esoteric. It requires noticing your physical state when you think about money. When you contemplate earning more, does your chest tighten? Do you hold your breath? Does your jaw clench? These are signs of activation. Now, deliberately shift your posture. Sit up straighter. Open your chest. Take a deep breath. Notice how your emotional state shifts. This is the rewiring. Repeated moments of consciously shifting from a contracted state to an open state teaches your nervous system a new baseline. Over time, the open state becomes more available to you. You don't spend your financial life in contraction. The fourth practice is deliberate attention and noticing. Your RAS filters your reality. You can deliberately train it to notice different things. If your story has been, "I can't afford things," your RAS has been highlighting things you can't afford. Deliberately shift attention. Notice things you can afford. Notice small abundance. Notice where money exists in your life right now. Notice resources, skills, opportunities. Each time you notice these, you're training your RAS to highlight abundance instead of scarcity. Your perception gradually shifts. Your reality gradually changes because you're now making decisions from a different perception. The fifth practice is emotional reconnection to why money matters. Money is a tool, but the real motivation isn't money itself. It's what money represents. Security, freedom, choices, the ability to help others. Get specific about what having better financial circumstances would actually mean in your life. How would it feel to not worry constantly? What would you do with your time if you weren't anxious about money? Connect to the genuine emotion underneath. This emotional connection is what activates change more powerfully than any logical argument. When your nervous system feels the genuine desire, not for money itself, but for the freedom or peace or possibility that money enables. That's when real motivation emerges. The sixth practice is accountability through declaration. Tell someone. Not in a self-help way where you're confessing weakness. In a clear way where you're declaring what you're working to change. I'm rewiring my relationship to money. I'm taking small actions to prove to myself that I can handle finances differently. These are the specific actions I'm taking. Speaking this aloud, making it real in social space, activates a different part of your nervous system. Your brain takes it more seriously. You follow through differently. Your nervous system knows you've made a public commitment, and it changes how you approach the actions. The seventh practice is celebration of small progress. Every time you do something that contradicts your old story, acknowledge it. You made one good financial decision. Acknowledge it. You asked a question you've been avoiding. Celebrate that. You felt open instead of contracted when thinking about money. That matters. These acknowledgments aren't about self-help pablum. They're about giving your nervous system evidence that things are changing. Your brain needs to recognize and store these small wins. They're the building blocks of a new pattern. The common thread through all these practices is this. They're all about giving your nervous system direct, repeated, emotional evidence that a new story is possible. They're not about forcing yourself to think differently. They're about structuring your life so that you naturally start gathering evidence for a different story. The practices work because they work with your psychology rather than against it. Chapter 9. Your daily money practice. The non-negotiables. Transformation doesn't happen through grand gestures. It happens through small, consistent practices. Your daily money practice doesn't have to be time-consuming, but it does have to be consistent. Consistency is what signals to your nervous system that this is real, that this matters, that you're genuinely rewiring. Your daily practice has 3 components: morning intention, midday attention, and evening reflection. The morning intention, 5 minutes. Before you start your day, pause. Get clear about your intention with money today. This isn't about visualizing wealth or chanting affirmations. It's about asking yourself, what is one financial or resource-based decision I'm going to make today from a place of confidence instead of fear? It might be simple. I'm going to ask for what something is worth instead of immediately discounting it. I'm going to look at one investment opportunity I've been avoiding. I'm going to make one financial decision from calm instead of panic. The specificity matters. Your brain needs to know exactly what it's looking for. You're programming your RAS to notice opportunities that align with your intention. The midday attention, 1 minute, multiple times. Throughout your day, pause at least once or twice. Check in with your body. Are you in a state of contraction or openness around money? If you're contracted, deliberately shift. Breathe. Open your body. Bring your attention to something that genuinely represents resources or abundance in your life right now. These tiny moments of conscious attention train your nervous system. You're not trying to force a state of abundance. You're just interrupting the automatic contraction and introducing a moment of shift. The evening reflection, 5 to 10 minutes. Before you sleep, spend a few minutes on reflection. Did you follow through on your morning intention? If yes, notice how that felt. What did you learn? If no, what got in the way? No judgment, just honest observation. What does your answer tell you about your current state? What might you need to shift tomorrow? This reflection is where your conscious mind integrates the day's experience into your nervous system's learning. Beyond these daily practices, there's one weekly practice, one concrete financial action. It doesn't have to be big. It could be 5 minutes of research into a topic you've been avoiding. It could be a conversation with someone you trust about money. It could be reviewing your accounts and making one small change. It could be asking for something you want. The specific action matters less than the consistency of taking some action that contradicts your old story. You're building a library of evidence that you're capable of handling money differently. And monthly, spend time on reassessment. Are you noticing shifts in how you feel about money? Has your anxiety changed? Are you making different choices? Are your actions more aligned with how you want to live? These monthly check-ins help you see progress that's too subtle to notice day to day. They're where you recognize how far you've actually come. The reason people abandon practices is usually because they expect them to feel transformational immediately. They expect doing a practice to instantly shift them into abundance consciousness. What actually happens is subtle. Your body relaxes slightly more. You notice opportunities you would have missed before. You make one better decision. These don't feel dramatic, but they compound. Over weeks and months, the small shifts accumulate into significant changes. The practices work because they're not trying to force change. They're not trying to make you think your way into a new belief system. They're creating conditions where your nervous system naturally develops new evidence, new patterns, new baseline states. They're meeting you where you are and gradually expanding your window of possibility. Conclusion: the choice that starts everything. You now understand more about money blocks than most people ever will. You understand the neuroscience. You understand the psychology. You understand how quantum principles of observation shape the reality you experience. You understand your specific pattern. You understand the invisible architecture that's been controlling your financial life. You have the map. The question is whether you're going to walk it. This is the crucial moment, because knowledge without action becomes just another story you tell yourself. I know why I'm stuck. I understand the mechanism. I see the pattern. And then you close this book and resume your life exactly as it was. Your nervous system hasn't changed. Your old programs keep running. Your reality stays the same. Understanding is not transformation. Understanding is just the first step. Transformation requires something harder than understanding. It requires willingness to feel uncomfortable while your nervous system adjusts. It requires showing up to practices even when they don't feel like they're working. It requires taking actions that feel risky or foreign or outside your normal pattern. It requires tolerating the uncertainty of not knowing whether it will actually work until it does. The money blocks that have controlled your financial life for decades were installed gradually. They'll be updated gradually too. There's no magic moment where suddenly everything shifts. There's just the steady accumulation of small actions, small evidence, small shifts in how you experience money. Your nervous system slowly learns that the old story isn't absolutely true. New possibilities become available. Your behavior changes. Your reality changes. But this process only begins if you take one action. Not tomorrow. Not when you have more time or feel more ready. Today. Not a big action necessarily. Just one small action that contradicts your old story. One question asked. One piece of information researched. One moment where you behave as if you were someone capable of handling money well. Someone deserving of financial security. Someone whose decisions matter. That one action doesn't change everything, but it changes something. It creates the first evidence for the possibility of a new story. And that evidence, repeated and built upon, is how actual change happens. This is how people rewire themselves, through repeated, deliberate action rooted in small moments of courage. Your current financial reality isn't a reflection of your worth or your capability. It's a reflection of the programs your nervous system has been running, the stories you've been believing, the evidence you've been gathering to support those stories. And all of that can change because you're going to give your nervous system evidence that a different version of living with money is actually possible. The choice is yours. You can close this book and understand why you're stuck financially. Or you can take one action today that begins to unstick you. You can let this knowledge become just another story about yourself. Or you can let it become the beginning of actual change. The difference between the two is one action. That action is available to you right now. What will you choose?